My husband's sister crashed my birthday cake cutting. What she said left everyone speechless. On my birthday, right when I was about to cut my cake, my husband's sister decided to steal the spotlight. She chimed in with a smirk. "You don't deserve to be the center of attention." My husband? He just shrugged it off like it was no big deal. "She just likes to joke around," he said, as if that made it okay. I kept my cool, smiled back, and replied, "Well, then she'll love the joke I have in store." It didn't take long before her face turned pale as she realized what I'd done. Don't forget to subscribe and like this video so you don't miss any interesting stories. So, how did it all start? I'm 34, and I've been married to my husband, Ethan, who's 36, for 8 years now. We live in Chicago, and for a long time, I thought we had a solid marriage. Not perfect, but whose is? I loved him, and I believed he loved me. Still, there was always one thing that caused friction between us: his sister, Sophie. She's 38 and has always acted like the world revolves around her. If you share good news, she somehow has better news to one-up you. If you buy something nice, she suddenly needs the exact same thing, just bigger and better. And if you achieve something you're proud of, she has a way of making it seem unimportant. At first, I brushed it off as an annoying personality quirk, frustrating, sure, but not worth making waves over. But as time went on, her behavior escalated. She turned our wedding day into her moment by announcing her engagement during our reception. That engagement? It barely lasted a few months. When I got promoted at work, she hijacked our celebratory dinner by declaring she was thinking about going back to school. Spoiler alert, she never did. And every single time I tried to talk to Ethan about it, he would wave it away. "That's just Sophie," he'd say. "She likes to joke around. It's not a big deal." Except, eventually it became a very big deal. Last month, when my birthday rolled around, we kept things simple, just a cozy dinner party at our house with close friends and family. After a tough year at work, Ethan suggested something low-key, and I appreciated the thought. For once, I felt genuinely excited. Everything seemed perfect. Good food, great music, the people I cared about. Even Sophie was surprisingly quiet, which probably should have tipped me off that something was brewing. The moment I reached for the knife to cut my cake, she struck. Tapping her glass to get everyone's attention, she stood up and said, "Before we do this, I just have to share something." I paused, putting the knife down while every eye in the room turned to her. She flashed a smile and added, "I just think it's adorable that we're making such a fuss over this. I mean, really? 34 isn't exactly a milestone." An awkward chuckle rippled through the room. Then, with a dramatic flair, she dropped the bombshell. "But you know what is an achievement? Creating life. And guess what? I'm pregnant." The room exploded with gasps and congratulations while I stood there frozen, still clutching the cake knife. I glanced at Ethan, hoping he'd say something, anything. But all he did was shrug and mumble, "She just likes to joke around." And just like that, my birthday vanished. Sophie basked in the attention, hand resting on her stomach, feigning modesty while soaking up every bit of the spotlight. I could have let the anger consume me, and trust me, I was furious. But beneath that rage, I smiled because Sophie had no clue what was coming her way. 3 weeks before my birthday, I stumbled across something. One night, Ethan left his laptop open while he was in the shower. I wasn't trying to pry, honestly I wasn't, but an email notification popped up. The subject line read, "Deposit confirmed," and it was from his bank. Curious, I clicked on it. My heart nearly stopped when I saw a transfer of $2,500 to Sophie. Why on earth was Ethan sending that much money to his sister? Something felt off, really off. So, like anyone with a shred of common sense, I decided to dig deeper. I went digging, and what I uncovered made my stomach churn. Bank statements, dozens of them. Over the past year, Ethan had been sending Sophie thousands of dollars, month after month. It didn't stop there. I found their text messages, too, conversations that turned my blood cold. "Sophie, what if she finds out?" "Ethan, we can just tell her the baby is someone else's." "Sophie, she won't just keep quiet." I sat frozen, staring at the screen while the truth hit me like a brick wall. This wasn't just Sophie being her usual, attention-seeking self. She was having an affair with my husband, and she was carrying his child. My hands shook, my heart pounded, but I didn't cry. Not right away. Instead, I grabbed my purse and walked out the door, not sure where I was even going. For an hour, I wandered the streets, trying to process what I'd just discovered. And then, somewhere along the way, I made a decision. I wouldn't scream. I wouldn't break down. No, I was going to make sure they both paid for this. For the rest of their lives. So, I hired a private investigator. Within days, I had everything I needed: photos, messages, receipts. Proof of them sneaking into a hotel, credit card transactions for romantic dinners, gifts, even a cozy weekend getaway. I printed it all out, tucked it into a neat little folder, and waited. I waited for my birthday. I waited for Sophie to pull her usual stunt and steal the spotlight. And like clockwork, she did. Now, as she stood there soaking up everyone's attention, she had no idea her entire world was about to crumble. I raised my wine glass, flashed her a sweet smile, and said, "Wow, a baby. That's incredible news, Sophie. Even crazier considering the father is already married." The room went dead silent. Sophie's confident smile slipped right off her face. Ethan turned a sickly shade of pale. Somewhere in the crowd, someone whispered, "What?" I calmly pulled out my phone, tapped the screen, and let the evidence speak for itself. The room erupted in chaos. Sophie's mouth fell open in shock. Ethan stammered, struggling to form a coherent sentence. His mother swayed on her feet, looking like she might faint. And me? I stood there steady and calm because, for the first time in years, I'd taken something from Sophie. I had stolen her entire world, if only for a few delicious seconds. No one moved. No one spoke. The air was thick with tension as every eye darted between me, Ethan, and Sophie. Ethan tried to speak first, but all that came out was a choked, garbled noise. Sophie stood frozen, her eyes flicking around the room like a trapped animal, searching for an escape. Then, the dam broke. Ethan blurted out, "What the hell are you talking about?" Sophie stammered, "You're lying. You're crazy." I didn't react. Instead, I took another slow sip of my wine, reached for the folder, and tossed it onto the table like a winning hand. "If I'm lying," I said coolly, "then no one will mind taking a look." Curiosity got the better of a few guests. My best friend, Hannah, grabbed the folder, flipped it open, and gasped loud enough for everyone to hear. "Oh, my God." Ethan lunged forward, desperate to snatch it away, but Hannah yanked it out of his reach. "Sit down," she hissed. And to my utter delight, he actually did. Then, she started reading aloud. First, the hotel receipts. Then, the bank transfers. Finally, the incriminating texts. The room shifted from murmurs of confusion to stunned, horrified silence. Ethan's mother, who had been standing next to Sophie with her hand resting gently on her shoulder, recoiled as if she'd touched something vile. Her voice trembled as she turned to Sophie and demanded, "Tell me this isn't true." Sophie's lips moved soundlessly, but no explanation came. "And Ethan?" That coward turned his anger on me instead. "Why would you do this?" he snapped, as if I were the one who had betrayed him. I laughed, an actual, honest-to-God laugh. "Oh, I'm sorry, Ethan," I said, my voice dripping with sarcasm. "Was I supposed to just sit back and let you keep screwing your own sister?" The room gasped in unison. Somewhere, a glass slipped from someone's hand and shattered on the floor. Ethan's face turned a furious shade of red. "Lower your voice," he hissed through clenched teeth, as if that would somehow make this mess go away. For the first time, Sophie found her voice. It was high-pitched and trembling. "It's not like that," she stammered, her hands twitching at her sides. I arched an eyebrow. "Oh, then what is it like, Sophie? Please enlighten us." Her hands curled into fists, and, for a split second, it looked like she might actually take a swing at me. Instead, she blurted out, "You don't understand. Ethan and I—" She cut herself off, realizing too late that she'd already said more than she should have. The room was silent, every eye fixed on her, waiting, no, hoping, for her to keep digging herself deeper. But instead of answering, she bolted. She shoved past the guests, nearly tripping over a chair in her rush to escape. Ethan hesitated just long enough to look even guiltier before chasing after her. And just like that, they were gone. I turned back to the stunned crowd, lifted my glass, and said, "So, anyone else want cake?" A few nervous chuckles broke the silence. Hannah, ever the supportive friend, clapped me on the back. "Best birthday party ever," she whispered. The mood shifted again when Ethan's mother, Margaret, the same woman who once acted like Ethan hung the moon, collapsed into a chair, her face buried in her hands. "Oh my God," she mumbled over and over, like a broken record. Hannah, trying to be helpful, patted her back awkwardly. Do you want some water? Or, like, a therapist?" Meanwhile, Ethan's father, George, who had been sitting quietly through the entire spectacle, stood up without a word. He grabbed his coat and muttered, "I'm going to kill him." And, judging by the look on his face, he meant it. Margaret jumped to her feet, panic flooding her voice. "George, stop." But he didn't stop, and neither did I. I followed him outside, just in time to catch Ethan and Sophie screaming at each other in the driveway. Sophie had completely dropped her innocent act. "You idiot," she shrieked. "How the hell did you let her find out?" Ethan, pacing back and forth like a lunatic, dragged both hands through his hair. "I don't know," he snapped. "She must have been snooping." I laughed again, sharp and cold. "Snooping?" I snapped. "You left your damn laptop open, you moron. You practically handed me the evidence." Both of their heads snapped toward me, their faces twisted with panic. And George? He didn't say a word. He just hauled back and punched Ethan square in the face. Ethan hit the pavement with a thud. Blood poured from his nose, probably broken, maybe worse. It was a beautiful sight. After that, things spiraled fast. Sophie screamed like a banshee. Ethan rolled on the ground, groaning in pain. And because life has a sense of humor, 2 squad cars pulled up not 10 minutes later. One of the officers stepped out, looking between the bloodied mess on the ground and the hysterical woman next to him. "All right," he said, exasperated. "What's going on here?" Still clutching his face, Ethan groaned. "My dad hit me." George, completely unfazed, shrugged. "Yep." The officer blinked at him. "Why?" I stepped forward before anyone else could spin a lie. "Because my husband's been sleeping with his own sister." The officer's face twisted in disgust. "Jesus Christ," he muttered under his breath. Sophie, ever the drama queen, burst into tears, big, fake crocodile tears. "It's not what it looks like," she wailed, as if anyone would believe her after everything they'd heard. The officer nearest to her side and pinched the bridge of his nose. "Ma'am, I don't even know what the hell this looks like." Still sitting in a puddle of his own blood, Ethan rasped, Just get me out of here." The cops exchanged a look before one of them turned back to George. "Sir, we're gonna have to take you in for assault." George didn't argue. He just gave a stiff nod, like he knew it was coming and didn't care. But before they could cuff him, Margaret burst through the front door, practically collapsing on the lawn. "Please no," she sobbed, nearly hysterical. "Don't arrest him. Please." She was crying so hard her legs buckled, and Hannah had to catch her before she hit the ground. One of the cops, clearly fed up with the circus unfolding before him, let out a long sigh. "Look," he said, "if he's not pressing charges, we can let this slide." Ethan, still sprawled on the ground with blood dripping onto his shirt, mumbled, "I just want to go home." The officer turned to George. "You good with that?" George snorted. "I've already wasted a punch on this piece of crap. I'm not wasting any more energy." And just like that, it was over. The cops drove away, and Ethan and Sophie, battered and humiliated, slunk into Ethan's car and disappeared into the night. Me? I strolled back inside, picked up the cake knife, and cut myself the biggest, most indulgent slice of cake I could manage. Because the best part? This was far from finished. By all accounts, the night should have ended there. I should have crawled into bed, satisfied with the fact that I'd blown their filthy little secret sky high. But as I sat at the table, savoring the sweet taste of victory and chocolate, a gnawing sensation twisted in my gut. Something felt off. Ethan and Sophie's exit had been too quiet. No explosive outburst. No desperate attempts to spin a new narrative. No parting insults. They had simply slithered out the door, without a fight. And if there was one thing I knew about them, it was that neither of them ever backed down that easily. Ethan always had to land the final blow, the last word, the upper hand. And Sophie? She thrived on playing the wounded victim. Yet instead of dragging the night into a melodramatic mess, they'd made a quick, clean escape. That didn't sit right with me. And deep down, I knew they weren't done. I was right. The next morning, I woke up to 15 missed calls and a flood of unread messages. At first, I assumed it was just the aftermath of the party. Maybe Ethan's family scrambling to do damage control or one of my friends dying to dissect every last detail over a cup of coffee. But then, I saw the name on my screen, my boss, and the message beneath it sent an icy chill down my spine. "Call me ASAP. We need to talk." My heart slammed against my ribs as I bolted upright, fumbling to call him back. "Hey," I said, my voice shaky. "What's going on?" His tone was distant, cold. "We received an email about you this morning. Actually, several emails." A sick feeling churned in my stomach. "Emails? What do you mean?" He hesitated like he didn't even want to say it. "Someone sent HR package. Screenshots. Photos. Accusation." He exhaled sharply. "Serious accusations." I felt like I'd been sucker punched. What kind of accusations? Sexual harassment. Embezzlement. Workplace bullying. They even included a supposed testimony from a former coworker. His voice was tight with tension. "It's bad. For a moment, I couldn't speak. My vision blurred at the edges.
What?
That's insane. I know, he said, though his voice softened slightly. But corporate takes this stuff seriously. Effective immediately, you're on administrative leave while we investigate. I gripped the phone, my knuckles white. My whole body trembled with rage and disbelief. Who the hell would? I trailed off, but I already knew. Of course, it was Sophie. That conniving, petty, evil little witch. This wasn't about evening the score. This was about breaking me. But if she thought I'd roll over and let her win, she had another thing coming. The next few hours were a blur of frantic damage control. I called HR. I called my lawyer. Even reached out to a few trusted coworkers to see if anyone had caught wind of the rumors. The so-called testimony? A complete fabrication. The coworker they claimed had written it flat out denied everything. The embezzlement allegations? Total nonsense. But because the emails were anonymous and corporate had to cover their bases, I was stuck in limbo. And Sophie knew it. She wasn't trying to clear her name, she was trying to drag mine through the mud. But if she thought she had the upper hand, she was sorely mistaken. That afternoon, my phone buzzed with an unknown number. Normally, I would have ignored it, but my instincts told me to answer. Hello, I said cautiously. At first, there was nothing but silence. Then, a hesitant voice spoke. Is this? They paused as if unsure. Is this my name? I sat up straighter, tension prickling down my spine.
Yes.
Who is this? Another pause, longer this time. And then, my name is Vanessa. I think we need to talk. It's about Sophie and Ethan. I froze, my grip tightening on the phone. What about them? There was a pause, a shaky breath. And then, I'm Sophie's former best friend, and I know everything. That evening, I met Vanessa at a coffee shop across town. She looked to be in her late 30s, blonde, with tired eyes and an expression that practically screamed, I've seen some things. She didn't bother with small talk. Sophie is a snake, she said flatly, and I know what she did to you. But trust me, she's done worse. I leaned in, my pulse quickening. Tell me everything.
And she did.
Apparently, Sophie had made a hobby out of ruining lives. She once planted drugs in a friend's car and tipped off the police anonymously, getting the woman arrested. The charges were eventually dropped, but the friend still lost her job. Another time, Sophie faked having a stalker and blamed an ex who had the audacity to break up with her, completely shattering his reputation. She even tried to blackmail her own mother for cash. But the real bombshell? Sophie had done this exact same thing before. What do you mean? I asked, my stomach twisting into knots. Vanessa hesitated, then pulled out her phone and scrolled through her messages. 3 years ago, Sophie had an affair with a married man. When his wife found out, Sophie retaliated by spreading fake accusations, just like she's doing to you. My blood ran cold. What happened to the wife? Vanessa exhaled slowly. She lost everything. Her job, her friends, her whole life. She had to move out of state just to escape Sophie. Her lips pressed into a tight line. Sophie won. I felt sick to my core. Why are you telling me this? Because, Vanessa said, locking eyes with me. Sophie finally screwed me over too, and I want to watch her burn. By the time I got home, my mind was racing. This wasn't just about me anymore. Sophie was a full-blown predator, and if I didn't stop her, she'd find her next victim. I wasn't about to let that happen. So I did what any sane person would do. I called the private investigator again. I need you to dig up everything on Sophie, I told him, my voice cold and steady. Every scam, every lie, every dirty little secret. He let out a low chuckle. You got it. Then I made another call. To George, Ethan's father. The man who had already proven he wasn't afraid to throw a punch. George, I said, my tone smooth and deliberate. How would you like to help me destroy Sophie and Ethan? Silence stretched across the line. Then, finally, the words I'd been hoping to hear. Tell me what to do. From that moment on, things moved fast. The PI delivered, and he delivered big. Within days, I had a mountain of dirt, evidence of Sophie's scams, testimonies from people she destroyed, even legal records I hadn't known existed. Turns out, she'd been sued for defamation.
Twice.
She settled both cases out of court, but the pattern was clear. Where Sophie went, chaos followed. And then came the final piece of the puzzle. Vanessa reached out to Sophie's former best friend. The one Sophie had framed for drug possession. When I heard her full story, I knew exactly what needed to happen. It was time to end this. I planned everything down to the last detail. George pulled some strings and convinced Margaret, Ethan and Sophie's mom, to host a family intervention at their house. We framed it as a way to fix things and talk it out. Sophie and Ethan both agreed to come. They had no idea what was waiting for them. The night of the confrontation, the air was thick with tension. Ethan and Sophie strolled in together, acting like they didn't have a single care in the world. Sophie wore her usual smug expression, that infuriating little smirk like she still believed she could spin this to her advantage. She had no clue she was walking straight into her own execution. George sat at the head of the dining table, stiff and radiating anger. Margaret looked hollow, red-eyed, and worn thin from days of crying. Hannah and Vanessa flanked me, both ready to strike if things got messy. Across from us sat the guilty pair. The storm was brewing, and they were about to get caught in the middle. George's voice cut through the silence. "We need to talk about what you two have done." Ethan let out a heavy sigh, slumping back in his chair. "Dad, come on. This is ridiculous." Sophie folded her arms across her chest, her chin jutting out in defiance. "Are we really doing this? What do you people want from me?" I leaned forward, calm and cold. "We want the truth." Sophie rolled her eyes. "You already know the truth. Ethan and I are together. You need to get over it." I smiled, a slow, deliberate smile that had her posture stiffening. "Oh, Sophie," I said sweetly, "I wasn't talking about that truth." I reached into my bag and pulled out a thick stack of papers, placing them on the table with a heavy thud. I began flipping through them, savoring the way her eyes widened. "This," I said, "is proof that you've been doing this for years. Framing people, destroying lives, ruining reputations.
And now?
Now, everyone in this room is going to hear exactly who you are." For the first time, Sophie's mask cracked. "What is this?" she demanded, her voice rising in panic. "This is bullshit." I didn't answer her. Instead, I turned to Vanessa. "Tell them." Vanessa exhaled sharply, then lifted her chin and fixed Sophie with a steady glare. "You framed me for drug possession, Sophie. You planted drugs in my car because I started dating your ex, and you wanted to ruin my life." The room seemed to freeze. Margaret gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. Sophie's entire body went rigid. "And then there was Leah," Vanessa pressed on. "You accused her of harassment at work. She lost everything because of you." Sophie's hands trembled as she slammed her palms against the table. "That's not true," she shrieked. I didn't flinch. Instead, I dropped the final bomb, a crisp police report from when she was 18. I slid it across the table. "Explain this," I said coolly. Her face drained of color. It was all there in black and white. How she had falsely accused a teacher of inappropriate behavior simply because he gave her a bad grade. George shot to his feet, so fast his chair scraped across the floor. "You did what?" His voice thundered through the room. Sophie stammered, panic bleeding into her expression. It's not." She whipped her head toward Ethan, her composure shattering. "Ethan, say something." But Ethan just stared. His mouth hung open as he took in the avalanche of evidence in front of him. For the first time, I saw it. The flicker of doubt, the unraveling of his blind loyalty. You did this." His voice was barely above a whisper. And then Sophie broke. "So what?" she screamed, her face twisting with rage. "So what if I did? I survived. They deserved it." And with that, the last thread holding her lies together snapped. Ethan staggered back, like her words had physically hit him. His face had gone pale, his breath shallow. "Oh my God," he murmured. "I believed you." He ran his hands through his hair, shaking his head as the weight of the truth finally crashed down on him. "I ruined my life for you." Ethan's voice trembled with anger and disbelief. Across the table, Sophie's mask of control shattered as panic crept into her eyes. "Ethan, no. You love me. You said we were in this together." Her voice cracked as she reached for him, desperate to pull him back under her spell. But Ethan stepped away, his face pale and hollow. "No," he said, shaking his head slowly. "You used me. You used everyone. I threw away my marriage for you. And for what? Lies." She lunged, clutching at his arms. "Ethan, please," she begged, her voice sharp with hysteria. He ripped himself free like her touch burned. "Stay away from me," he whispered, disgust curling every word. Then, for the first time in years, he turned to face me. "I am so sorry." For a split second, I thought his apology might mean something, might patch over the wreckage he'd left behind. But I wasn't the same person he'd betrayed. "You don't get to be sorry," I said coldly. Whatever pity I might have felt evaporated. He deserved every consequence coming his way. His shoulders sagged, defeat clinging to him like a shadow. "I have nothing left," he muttered. And I didn't feel bad. Not even a little. The fallout was swift and brutal. George kicked Ethan out of the house that very night. Margaret, once blinded by motherly devotion, cut both of them off completely. She refused to speak their names again. Any fragile loyalty Sophie thought she had crumbled to dust. But karma wasn't done with her yet. Once Vanessa and Leah shared their stories, others followed. People Sophie had crushed over the years crawled out of the woodwork, each with their own nightmare to tell. Real lawsuits piled up. Sophie's carefully curated life fell apart piece by piece until there was nothing left but ashes. She was a pariah, abandoned by the very people she'd manipulated. And Ethan? He vanished. Last I heard, he was holed up in a rundown motel on the outskirts of town, unemployed, alone, drowning in the mess he'd helped create. Whatever dream he thought he had with Sophie was long dead. As for me, I got my life back. HR not only cleared my name but offered me a promotion as an apology. I took it, of course. I'd earned it. But I didn't stop there. I took a solo trip to Italy, a promise to myself that I'd put this behind me. I reconnected with friends I'd let slip away. I reclaimed the parts of myself that Ethan had tried to break. And, most importantly, I never looked back.